My name is Vivian Carter, daughter of the Carter family old money, East Coast prestige, Manhattan influence, and every ounce of pressure that came with it. My father, ever the meticulous strategist, chose three boys from troubled yet promising backgrounds and raised them in our estate as potential husbands for me. He called it a modern twist on ancient custom. I called it absurd. But at the time, I was too young to know the difference between fate and manipulation. In my previous life, when he laid out three photographs on his desk and asked me which one I wanted, I picked the boy I had loved since childhood, Andrew Blake. I remember the light filtering through the blinds, casting stripes across Andrew's calm face in that photo. I remember my heart thudding so loud I barely heard my father say, "Choose wisely, Vivian." But there was no choice. I loved Andrew. Everyone knew it. Even Ethan and Ryan did, though they never said a word. Until the eve of our wedding, when Andrew and our live-in maid, Lily Evans, climbed the rugged hills behind our estate and vanished. No note. No phone call. Just silence. My world cracked. My pride kept me from falling apart. And then I made the worst mistake of my life. I followed him. I thought I could bring him back. Instead, I was captured in that forsaken village tucked deep in the Appalachian woods, imprisoned and stripped of everything me dignity, my future, my ability to bear children. The days blurred together in darkness and filth, and when I was finally rescued months later, I was barely alive. Ryan Cooper was the one who took care of me afterward. Sweet, careful Ryan. He made me believe in warmth again. Maybe it was the trauma, maybe it was the loneliness, but I clung to him, and we got married. In year 3, I found out it had all been a lie. I had stepped out of a gallery downtown when I saw Andrew again holding Lily, who was 8 months pregnant. Ryan stood across from him, voice eerily calm as he said, "The Carter family is too powerful. To be with Lily, I had to pretend I was dead. Vivian can't have children. When the baby is born, just say it's hers." And I ran. I stormed toward them, demanded answers, shouted until my voice cracked. And then, in the chaos, my heel caught the edge of a marble step. I fell. I hit my head. Everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was 16 again. Back in my father's office. Back in front of the three photographs. My hands trembled. My chest ached. My mind burned with the image of Andrew's cold stare, Lily's swollen belly, Ryan's betrayal. I didn't hesitate. I reached for the photo in the corner. Ethan Carter, quiet, obedient, forgettable. My father looked surprised. "Didn't you always like Andrew? Why this sudden change of heart?" He frowned, then added with a sigh, "Ethan's a good kid, but he has asthenospermia. If you marry him, children might not come easy." I looked at the photo again. Ethan's eyes were serious, not sad. Not desperate. He had once promised to follow my lead. I used to think that was weakness. But now I saw the strength in it. "Children aren't everything," I whispered. "And adoption's an option." My father studied me in silence, then nodded. A daughter of the Carter family should have this kind of courage. That evening, I stepped outside and saw Andrew and Lily whispering by the fountain. Lily pretended to walk away, but Andrew grabbed her hand and strode straight toward me. "Vivian," he said coldly, "tell your father you chose the wrong person. I won't marry you. I'm in love with Lily. We're going public this time." My heart didn't even flinch. I smiled. "Do you remember the only rule my father gave when he brought you here?" I asked softly. "If you wanted to stay, you had to accept being my fiancé. If you had objections, you were free to leave." Andrew's eyes narrowed. "Of course I remember. But don't worry, I'll repay the Carter family's kindness threefold. I just won't marry you." He always played the victim, even when fed, clothed, and educated by us. Lily chimed in with her sickening sweetness. "Don't blame him, Miss Carter. He doesn't want to hurt you." Andrew looked at her like she hung the stars. "You gave us a cookie and a set of new clothes when we arrived. That moment changed everything for me. We swore to treat you well forever." My stomach turned. The cookies were for me. The clothes too. Lily just handed them over. I said nothing, only watched as Lily ran off in tears and Andrew chased after her. The next day, my phone blew up. My best friend had texted me a dozen times. I opened Weibo and saw it trending Andrew's love story with Lily, written like some poetic redemption tale. He never showed me emotion like that, never wrote about me. But to her, he spilled his heart. He said, if she smiles at me, I can survive anything. Living under someone else's roof makes love pure. I nearly laughed. If I hadn't been cast as the villain, I might have cried. Soon, someone leaked Lily's photo applying for a predatory loan. It was blurry, scandalous. I was blamed. Of course. That night, Andrew burst into the lounge, yanked me by the hair, and threw me to the floor. Vivian, you spiteful bitch. You want revenge on me?
Fine.
But why drag Lily into it? Lily walked in crying, knelt beside me, and whimpered. I borrowed that loan to save my mother.
She's gone now.
Please don't ruin me. I laughed. Her mother had worked as our maid. She died giving birth to Lily. My father pitied her and kept her in the house. I gave her everything in allowance, a card, even a room of her own. She blew through money recklessly, and when I took back the card, she cried foul. But no one cared about the truth. Ryan entered and helped Lily up, eyes full of pity for her and disgust for me. Andrew and Lily are in love. Why are you so obsessed? You think money gives you the right to ruin lives. Then he looked me dead in the eyes. Publicly admit you made that photo, and I'll marry you instead of Andrew. Even Andrew looked shocked. Lily shook her head, crying harder.
No, Ryan.
I can't let you do that for me. Ryan stroked her head gently. I stared up from the floor, numb. I remembered how he had once bathed me when I was broken, carried me through the hospital, whispered promises into my ear. But all of that had been a leaf for Lily's benefit. You think you're offering me charity? I said. You all forget who brought you into this house. You ungrateful bastards. Don't talk about pride now, not after you've taken everything I've given. Andrew sneered. Vivian, keep that attitude. See where it gets you. The next day, they posted a video accusing my family of raising child husbands like cattle. Lily painted herself as the victim. Ryan exposed himself as one of the chosen boys and posted his own story. I became the witch who broke them apart. My name trended for the wrong reasons. Before I could respond, I was kidnapped. When I woke up, I was in a conference hall surrounded by men. On a massive screen, for photoshopped adult film covers featured my face. I couldn't breathe. Andrew stepped forward with Lily on his arm and said, apologize to Lily, or I'll release these. I laughed bitterly. Keep dreaming. His eyes gleamed.
Fine.
Then let's start the auction. First night of the Carter Heiress $5 starting bid. I couldn't believe it. This was a man I once loved. I asked, do you even know what you're doing? He smiled like the devil. Call the cops, and the footage goes viral. Lily leaned into him, looking meek. Miss Carter, I try to stop him. But you really should just kneel and say sorry. Her tone was caring, but her eyes danced with triumph. I said, I want to light a sky lantern. What's that? Someone laughed. She wants more power, Andrew smirked. Let's give her more. Bids climbed 500, 5,000, 5 million. I didn't care. I only wanted time. You hate me this much? I asked. Andrew spat. We were your dogs. You think giving us food makes you noble? Only Lily ever treated me like a person. She gave me a pen when I needed one. You just criticized me and smothered me. I had no words. That pen? I gave it to her to give to him. I funded every one of his failed startups. I defended him when he was insulted at school. I loved him. But Lily's crumbs meant more. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Men in black poured in. Miss Carter, one of them said. Mr. Carter sent us. You're safe now. Andrew was dragged away, sputtering. I'm the heir to the Carter family. You can't do this. The guard said calmly, if you want to keep bidding, Mr. Carter will send the money himself. As for the heir, well, that hasn't been decided yet. Andrew, shut up. Outside, my phone buzzed nonstop. Ethan had posted a statement, dignified, clean, and powerful. The tide turned. Public opinion shifted. Then the phone rang. Ryan's voice came through, strained. Did you ask Ethan to do this? Would it matter if I said no? I replied. He paused. I know it wasn't you who leaked that photo. But Lily's fragile. We thought you could take the heat. You're the strong one. She's not. My chest burned.
So you knew, I said.
You all knew, but still made me the villain. He said, let her go, Vivian. Help her and I'll marry you. We can make this right. My voice went flat. Ryan, did you know Andrew tried to auction me last night? Silence. Then I said, you both better show up at the engagement party. Or Lily dies. He cursed, but I hung up. A message arrived from Andrew. Even if you marry me, it won't matter. I'll always love Lily. I stared at the screen and whispered, and I'll make you both pay. For everything. The morning of the engagement party arrived with an odd stillness, the kind that settles just before a storm tears the sky open. The Carter estate was buzzing with staff and florists and musicians, but I moved through the hall like a ghost in silk present, but distant. I had chosen Ethan. The world didn't know it yet, and maybe that was the only power I still had to choose silence in a room full of noise. My fingers brushed against the velvet box resting on the dresser, the one holding the ring. Not the one I'd always dreamed of, but the one I needed now, forged not in romance but in clarity. Outside, the estate garden had been transformed into a venue straight out of a bridal magazine. Crystal chandeliers hanging from trees, polished stone walkways, and roses climbing archways like eager hands reaching for something just out of reach. Guests arrived in waves: politicians, CEOs, actresses pretending to be modest, and socialites pretending not to notice each other. My father stood proudly at the entrance, shaking hands, laughing too loudly, a little too stiff. He wanted to give me the world on a platter. He had no idea I'd already seen what hell looked like behind its polished walls. Ryan arrived first.
Of course he did.
He knew how to play the respectful son-in-law better than anyone. Vivian, he said, voice warm, eyes cautious. You look stunning. I looked at him and wondered how many lies could fit behind one smile. Save the charm, I said coolly. It's wasted on me. His jaw tensed, but he didn't leave. If you go through with this, you're not just hurting Andrew, you're hurting yourself. I laughed, a dry, bitter thing. Is that what Lily told you to say? His expression shifted. There was guilt. I walked past him and into the ballroom, letting the weight of my gown trail behind like a warning. Andrew showed up late.
Typical.
And not alone. He walked in with Lily draped over his arm like a delicate accessory, her expression perfectly calculated, timid, regretful, and just innocent enough to make people doubt their instincts. She wore white. Not ivory, not cream white. As if mocking the institution she was about to trample. When our eyes met, she tried to turn away, but Andrew held her close and whispered something into her ear that made her smile. My stomach curled, not from jealousy, but from the sheer audacity of it all. They really believed I wouldn't fight back. Not this time. My father called for silence as he stepped onto the stage, preparing to make the announcement. But before he could speak, Lily broke away from Andrew and dropped to her knees. Please, Mr. Carter, she sobbed, her hands trembling just enough to look real. Don't separate me from the man I love. I know I've made mistakes. I shouldn't have come between Vivian and Andrew. But we love each other. And this isn't the Qing dynasty. We believe in love now, don't we? The entire hall held its breath. My father's face turned gray with shock. His eyes darted toward me, unsure. Lily's voice rose, urgent, trembling with theatrical sincerity. I'm pregnant with Andrew's child. Please don't take him from us. A single gasp echoed through the crowd. Then a flurry of whispers. My temples throbbed. Before I could speak, Andrew was on the stage, shoving me aside and yelling at the security guards, "Don't touch her. No one lays a hand on Lily." My father stood frozen, coughing, his pride cracking in front of the whole room. You want to rebel? He choked. Andrew didn't flinch. I'll marry Vivian if you want. But Lily's pregnancy care must be top tier. And once the baby's born, I'll be with them during the week. Weekends with Vivian. That's my condition. He said it like he was offering a gift, not blackmail. Like he thought I would still say yes. My laugh was loud enough to stop the room. Andrew, you really think you're the prize here? His smirk faltered. You chose me once. You'll choose me again.
Wrong, I said.
I already chose someone else. From the back of the room, Ethan appeared, dressed in a white suit. I'd picked out myself. His presence wasn't loud, but it commanded attention. He walked past the crowd, straight to me, and offered his hand. Miss Carter, he said softly. I'm here. I took his hand, let him pull me close. I wasn't alone anymore. Not today. Not this time. My fiancé, I said clearly, is Ethan Carter. Andrew looked like someone had slapped him. You hate him, he whispered. Everyone knows that. I did, I admitted. But he was the only one who never betrayed me. That matters now. Andrew scoffed. He has no future. He's nothing but your father's guard dog. He's loyal. That's worth more than your 5 failed businesses and fake deaths. He's infertile, Andrew snapped. I smiled. I don't care. As long as it's Ethan, I'll take him any way he comes. Ryan tried to intervene, voice rising with desperation. Vivian, don't let that night ruin your judgment. What happened, what we did, it was wrong. But you love Andrew. You shouldn't let bitterness control your future. You knew, I said softly. You knew I wasn't the one who posted Lily's photo.
You knew she lied.
And still, you treated me like trash. He opened his mouth to argue, but Ethan stepped forward, calm and composed. The pen Lily gave you, he said, turning to Andrew, was from Vivian. She used it for 2 years. She even bought a new one for you, but Lily gave you the old one and took credit. You cherished that pen like it was sacred. And you never realized. His voice didn't rise, but it cut through the room like glass. You couldn't even see the woman who truly loved you. I felt something shift inside me. A wall crumbling, a blindfold falling. Ethan wasn't loud, wasn't flashy. But he saw everything. Even me. I clapped twice, and the doors opened again. A man with a shaved head walked in, smirking. Miss Carter, he said. We met a few months ago. This girl Lily Evans, she borrowed money from me 4 times using explicit collateral. When she couldn't pay, she climbed into my bed. Then she moved on to my brother. Lily turned ghost white. You're lying, she screeched. Andrew, it's not true. The man smirked again, pulled a USB stick from his pocket. I've got 10 gigabytes of proof. Wanna watch? Andrew froze. Ryan looked nauseous. Lily clutched her belly, tried to fall into Andrew's arms. The baby, she whimpered. Please help. Without thinking, they both bolted with her, disappearing out the door. And just like that, the performance was over. The masks cracked. The audience dispersed. Ethan took my hand and squeezed. Miss Carter, he said softly, you finally saw me. I looked at him, really looked. This man had watched over me in silence for years. Loved me without demanding anything in return. I had always been chasing ghosts while he stood in the shadows, waiting. Not for gratitude. Not for reward. But for me. My father gave his blessing with tired eyes and a faint smile. I saw pride there and relief. This time, the banquet continued. The world spun on. And I had finally chosen the right person. After the engagement banquet ended, and the last guests left with champagne on their breath and secrets in their eyes, I sat alone in my room, staring at the city lights flickering outside the window like distant constellations I could never reach. The ring on my finger was unfamiliar, not because I regretted my choice, but because peace was a stranger I hadn't invited in years. I kept turning the gold band over, wondering when love became such a battlefield that even victory felt like mourning. Ethan had gone to speak with my father business, no doubt, and I found myself sinking into the velvet armchair, the silence around me pressing against my ribs. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing anyone. I wasn't being chased. And yet I didn't feel safe. Because silence always comes before a scream. My phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. Lily, in a red lace dress, sitting on a stranger's lap in a club, a cigarette in one hand and a wad of cash in the other. Her face blurred, but unmistakable. Another came in seconds later this time, her name stamped at the corner, bold and unmistakable. My lips curled into a bitter smile. The perfect image of suffering she had curated was unraveling like cheap thread. I wasn't surprised. But what unsettled me was the sudden knock at my door. It was Ethan. He looked unsettled. You need to come downstairs, he said, voice tight. There's someone here you need to see. I followed him through the marble corridor and down the stairs, each step echoing louder than the last. In the grand foyer stood Ryan, arms bloodied, shirt torn, breathing hard like he'd run through a war zone to get here. She's gone, he gasped.
Lily.
She disappeared from the hospital. They think she faked it.
Her pregnancy.
Everything. My spine straightened. And why are you telling me this? Ryan's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place: regret, maybe, or shame hiding behind duty. Because Andrew's losing it. He thinks she was kidnapped. He's threatening people. Said if anything happens to her, he'll burn this entire city down. I stared at him, then at Ethan, who had already reached into his pocket and dialed someone, his posture steady, his voice low. He wasn't emotional, but efficient. Calculating. Protective. Ryan's desperation contrasted sharply against Ethan's quiet control. And it made me see everything more clearly. Let him burn, I said finally. Maybe then people will see what kind of man he really is. Ryan's breath caught. He's dangerous, Vivian. He's convinced you had something to do with this. Did I? I asked, tilting my head. What if I did? Ryan took a step back, like the thought hadn't occurred to him, like he still believed I was the same girl he used to carry out of hospitals and feed soup to at midnight. You wouldn't, he said. You're not that kind of person. You don't know what kind of person I am anymore, Ryan. You all lost the right to speak on my character the day you stood by while Andrew auctioned me like merchandise. His face crumpled, but I didn't flinch. Ethan finished his call. Security's been doubled. No one enters or exits the estate without clearance. I nodded. Good. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside Ethan in the dark, listening to the city groan in its sleep, every sound sharper, louder, more suspicious. Ethan turned to me once, brushed a strand of hair from my face, and whispered, You don't have to pretend to be strong with me. I didn't answer, but I pressed my forehead to his chest and let his heartbeat lull me into a stillness I didn't trust. The next morning, the storm broke. Andrew released a video well shot, expertly edited, overly emotional. He cried on screen, talked about love and betrayal, called me the villain, claimed I had threatened Lily, driven her to disappear. His voice cracked in all the right places. His followers saw how they frothed.
I was trending again.
Only this time, with hashtags like Carter-Harris abuse and justice for Lily. It was all too familiar. This cycle of martyrdom and manipulation, where he played the saint and I became the witch. I closed the app and smiled. Let them scream. Let them claw. I wasn't alone anymore. Ethan stood beside me like a lighthouse in a storm, unshakable. Do you want me to shut it all down? He asked quietly. I can, with one call. No, I said. Let them watch. Let them talk. I want the world to see the ending they deserve. My father summoned us later that afternoon. The office smelled of mahogany and power, and he sat behind his desk like a monarch judging a battlefield. I heard what Andrew's done, he said, sliding a file across the table. You'll want to read this. Inside were documents, hospital records, psychological evaluations, financial transactions. Every lie Lily had told. Every debt she'd accumulated. Every man she'd used. How did you get this? I asked. You're not the only one who learns from mistakes, he replied, his voice quiet. I didn't protect you the first time. I won't let it happen again. My throat tightened. I wanted to speak, but Ethan placed a hand over mine, grounding me in a silence that said everything. That evening, a private investigator Ethan had hired called with a lead. We found her, the voice crackled. She's working under a fake name at a club in Queens. But she's not alone. Andrew visits every night. I almost laughed. Of course he does. Ethan said nothing, just waited. Let's go, I whispered. The club was dark, pulsing with red light and bass-heavy music. We entered through the back, escorted by two of Ethan's men. At the far end of the room, on a shadowy couch, Lily sat curled into Andrew's lap, laughing at something he whispered into her ear. Her hands were wrapped around a cocktail glass, her body draped in a skin-tight silver dress, her eyes dead behind the glimmer. When she saw me, her face went stiff, but Andrew stood. "Vivian," he said, arms spread, as if I were the one intruding. "Come to mock us?" "No," I said, voice cold. "I came to say goodbye." "Goodbye," Lily echoed, her smile cracking. "You think this is over?" "It's already over," I said, nodding at Ethan. In seconds, a team of lawyers and officers stepped forward. "You're both being investigated for fraud, tax evasion, and sexual coercion," the officer said. "You may remain silent, but we recommend you don't," Lily screamed. Andrew lunged. Ethan stepped between us. "Don't," he warned. "You've already lost." I turned and walked out before they could say another word. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I exhaled. Ethan joined me, slipping his coat around my shoulders. "You okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But for once, I feel like I can breathe." And in that moment, beneath a flickering street lamp in the middle of nowhere, I realized something that struck me deeper than any betrayal ever had. This wasn't revenge. It was liberation. After the arrests, the world went quiet in the strangest way, like someone had turned the volume of life down to a low hum, barely audible but ever present. I no longer had to defend myself online, explain my silence in interviews, or calculate every breath around the press. The tabloids still buzzed with scandal, but the headlines had shifted from heiress villain to misunderstood survivor. But I didn't care anymore. Let the world draw its own conclusions. The truth had already buried itself deep enough inside me to no longer need anyone's approval. Ethan and I had moved into a new apartment overlooking the Hudson, far from the Carter estate, far from the ghosts of garden banquets and marble corridors. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt like freedom. Every morning, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors like spilled paint, warm and accidental, and I'd find Ethan standing by the window, shirtless, coffee in hand, reading the day's briefings with that unshakable calm of his. And every morning, I watched him a little longer, because somewhere between revenge and survival, I had fallen into something terrifyingly unfamiliar: peace. And with peace came questions I didn't know how to ask. Late one night, as the rain whispered against the glass and the city below shimmered like a wet painting, I turned to him in bed and asked, "Ethan, did you ever resent me? Back then, when I ignored you? When I chose Andrew? When I dismissed your silence like it meant nothing?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, his gaze searching not with accusation, but with memory. Then he reached out, brushing my cheek with his thumb. "No," he said simply. "Because I wasn't waiting for a reward. I just wanted you to be safe. Even if it wasn't with me." That broke something in me. Not in a tragic way, but like the sound of a wall finally crumbling after years of silent pressure. I pressed my lips to his, slow and unsure at first, then deeper, more desperate. We didn't speak again that night, not with words. But in the way he touched me, the way he held me like I was fragile but real, I heard everything he had been too quiet to say all these years. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt chosen. Ethan had a way of anchoring minute possessively, but steadily, like gravity reminding me I belonged to the earth, not the past. He never demanded my vulnerability. He waited for it to arrive on its own. Slowly, he began to appear at my meetings, offering insight when I needed it, protection when I didn't. My father saw the change and pulled me aside one evening. "He's not like the others," he said, folding his hands behind his back. "Ethan doesn't crave power. That makes him the most dangerous ally you'll ever have, her, the most loyal." I nodded, already knowing which he was. My father had begun transferring small pieces of the Carter Empire into my name quietly, deliberately. I was no longer just the face of the family. I was becoming its pulse. And Ethan, once the overlooked foster son, now stood at my right hand, sharper than any blade my father had ever wielded. But even strength breeds shadows. One night, I woke to the sound of Ethan breathing erratically beside me. His face was damp, twisted in a grimace, his hands clenching the sheets like they were lifelines. "Ethan," I whispered, shaking him gently. "You're dreaming." His eyes flew open, wild and unfocused. Vivian, he gasped. You're still here?
I blinked. Of course I am.
Why wouldn't I be? He sat up, chest rising and falling in uneven tides. Today's the date. The day you died. In the last life. You went to the mountains and never came back. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I had forgotten the anniversary. But he hadn't. He carried that death inside him like an unhealed wound. I reached out and cupped his face. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Not this time. But he didn't respond. He just leaned into my touch like a man drowning. That night, he didn't sleep again. And I didn't let go. Days passed. We fell into rhythm boardrooms by day, late night takeout by rooftop. He started to smile more, laugh even, but always with a hint of caution, like joy was something borrowed he might have to return. I tried to fill the silence he wouldn't explain with music, with movement, with words I wasn't used to saying. One morning, as I stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel and humming some forgotten tune, I found him staring at a photo of Yuson taken at the engagement banquet. What are you thinking about? I asked, drying my hair. How lucky I was, he said, still not looking away. And how unworthy I felt. I turned off the hairdryer. Don't you dare, I whispered. Don't you dare stand beside me and talk like you don't belong. He looked at me, then really looked and something shifted. A vulnerability I hadn't seen before. I used to think love was something I had to earn. By being useful. By being quiet. By watching you from a distance and hoping one day you'd notice. I crossed the room and kissed him, slow and lingering. You don't have to earn anything. You already did. When no one else stayed. That night, he didn't wake from any nightmares. And when he held me, it wasn't to confirm I was still alive. It was to remind me that he finally was. But happiness doesn't protect you from your past, it only delays its arrival. And ours came in the form of a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in rushed, almost frantic handwriting. Inside, a single photograph. Lily, standing outside a courthouse, visibly bruised, visibly alive. Scribbled beneath it, tell Ethan. The story isn't over. I crushed the photo between my fingers and watched the ashes of my past smolder in the fireplace. Ethan would find out eventually. But for now, I wasn't going to let her shadow poison what we'd finally built. For now, she was a ghost. And ghosts can't hurt you unless you invite them in. The day of the wedding began not with joy, but with uneasy and inexplicable tension that clung to the morning air like static before a lightning strike. I watched from the bedroom window as staff bustled through the garden, adjusting drapes, placing candles, fluffing floral arrangements that looked too delicate for what I was about to do. I had chosen this dress's smooth ivory satin sheath with a minimalist cut and no lace or frills because I wanted no illusions today.
No fantasies. No hiding.
Ethan had insisted on keeping the ceremony small, not out of fear but out of defiance. This wasn't a show for society. This was for us, a declaration that peace didn't need a spotlight. But I couldn't ignore the coiling sensation deep in my gut, the feeling that something or someone was watching. At noon, I slipped into the gown and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back had changed in ways no camera could capture. Her eyes weren't sharper, just more tired. Her smile wasn't brighter, just more earned. Her backbone wasn't straighter, just more tested. When I stepped out into the hallway, Ethan was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, wearing the suit I had picked for him 3 weeks ago. Charcoal gray, clean lines, crisp white shirt. Simple, powerful, exactly him. His eyes found me the way they always did, like I was the only fixed point in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. You're beautiful, he said, not out of flattery, but with quiet reverence. I opened my mouth to reply when a gasp erupted from the entrance. I turned, and time froze. Andrew, disheveled, desperate, wild-eyed like a man clawing out of a grave, he stumbled into the room and dropped to his knees before me. Vivian, he choked, voice cracking like dry ice. Don't marry him. Please. I made a mistake. Ish tricked me. Lily was never worth it.
I see that now.
I'll change. I'll fix everything. I blinked slowly, unsure if I was still breathing. Get up, I said, my voice too even to be natural. You're embarrassing yourself. He stayed on the floor, palms outstretched, eyes glistening with something between tears and madness. Don't you remember?
You used to love me.
You waited for me. I was your first choice.
Give me one last chance.
Behind me, I felt Ethan step forward, his presence like a silent storm. But I didn't need him to speak for me. I took a breath, not to calm myself, but to taste the closure I had long thought unreachable. You were my first choice, Andrew. And my biggest mistake. His face twitched. But Lilith's gone. She ran. I was wrong. You were always the one. No, I said, tilting my head. You just realized I'm the one who never needed you. He flinched. I could almost see the weight of those words flattening his pride. Please, if not for me, then for us. There is no us, I interrupted. There never was. You made sure of that the moment you sold me to a room full of strangers. That caught him. His mouth opened, then closed. And then, slowly, his eyes lost their light. What replaced it was something darker, colder. He reached behind his back and pulled out a blade. The kind of moment that splits reality in two. I froze. If I can't have you in this life, he whispered, voice trembling with hope and terror, then we'll try again in the next. Everything moved at once. My heels slipped on the polished floor. My gown tangled at my feet. Ethan lunged. Andrew's scream rose. I fell. But not alone. Ryan appeared like a ghost from my past, tackling Andrew to the ground in a sickening crash of limbs and metal. Blood splattered the white aisle runner. My breath caught as I watched the knife clatter away. Ethan dragged me back, arms tight, heart thundering against my shoulder. Are you hurt? He asked, voice shaking for the first time I could remember. I nodded. I'm fine. He didn't touch me. But Ryan. His arm was sliced open, dark crimson dripping onto the floor. He's insane, he muttered through clenched teeth. I followed him here. He was muttering to himself about fate. Reincarnation. Andrew was restrained and dragged out by security. His eyes stayed on me the entire time, empty, ruined. I didn't feel triumph. Only exhaustion. Later, when the guests had been ushered away and the blood cleaned and the silence returned, Ryan walked up to me and handed me a small red envelope. If Ethan ever hurts you, you call me. I'll come running. I stared at him. You're bleeding, I said. Still trying to play the martyr? He smiled weakly. Just doing what I should have done a long time ago. Ethan stepped in, pulled the envelope from my hand, and tossed it into the fireplace without breaking eye contact with Ryan. She doesn't need backup plans anymore. Ryan didn't argue. He just walked out, bandaged and bruised, his pride intact but his presence no longer needed. That night, Ethan held me tighter than ever. I would have killed him if he touched you, he murmured. I know, I whispered. But you didn't have to. Because I chose you before he ever reached me. The wedding was rescheduled. Quiet, private, without theatrics or headlines. And in that still, sacred moment, I promised myself I'd never look backward again. Lily was last seen working at a club in Jersey. Rumors said Andrew had sold her to pay off her debts, and she now worked not for cash, but survival. I didn't pity her. I didn't hate her. I just felt nothing. She had been a mirror for my weakness, and I had shattered it. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Ethan and I ran the Carter Enterprises together. Our days filled with meetings, our nights with whispered confessions and stolen kisses. He grew more protective, more aware of how fragile joy could be. Some nights he'd wake in a sweat, hand trembling against my skin, whispering, "You're still here?" And I'd kiss him, over and over, until the question no longer needed asking. Then one morning I woke to find him crying. Not loudly, not with sound, just tears rolling down his cheeks as he stared at the calendar. What is it? I asked, already fearing the answer. Today, he said hoarsely, was your funeral. In the other life. My chest ached. That wasn't me, I said. That was a version of me who never saw you. He shook his head. I don't ever want to lose you again. I cupped his face, leaned in close. Then hold me. Every day. Every night. Don't let go. And when he did, when our bodies met, desperate and raw and reverent, it wasn't lust. It was survival. Rebirth. Proof that two broken people could still fit like puzzle pieces that refused to be lost. Love didn't heal everything, but it let the wounds breathe. There's a moment after a storm when everything stills, not because the world is calm, but because it's catching its breath, and that was what my life became, one long exhale after chaos. Months after the wedding, the house Ethan and I shared had become a home, not because it was warm or perfectly decorated, but because it was filled with the unspoken rituals only love could create. The way he always poured my tea before his, the way I always left the lamp on when he came home late, the way silence between us meant comfort instead of tension. The Carter family business, once a gilded cage, became something I walked into with purpose now, not chained by legacy, but shaping it. Ethan no longer stood in my shadow, walked beside me, commanding meetings with an effortless intelligence that silenced rooms. Sometimes, I glance across the boardroom table and feel something unexpected pride, not just in him, but in us, in the way we'd carved out something honest from the wreckage of our past. But not all ghosts stay buried, and grief has a way of showing up long after the wounds have scarred. One evening, after a gala event filled with champagne and shallow laughter, Ethan and I returned home to find a single envelope slipped under our door. No name.
No stamp.
Just a symbol drawn in ink I recognized instantly as small crescent moon, Lily's signature from her old journal. My throat tightened as I opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No threats, no please. Just a sentence written in her elegant script. The past doesn't disappear just because you close your eyes. I showed it to Ethan, and something unreadable flickered in his expression. She's watching, I said. He nodded slowly. Then let her see what peace looks like. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, staring into the ink-black skyline, thinking of all the versions of myself I had been. The girl who loved blindly, the woman who burned for justice, the survivor who learned to trust again. They lived inside me like layered paint, each color bleeding into the next. Ethan joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind, his breath steady against my neck. Do you regret anything? He asked softly. Not choosing you sooner, I whispered. Everything else led me here. He was quiet for a moment. Sometimes I still think I'm dreaming, he admitted. That I'll wake up and you'll be gone again. I turned in his arms, placing his hand over my heartbeat. I'm here, I said.
He shows you.
And I'll keep choosing you. Time passed like wind in a canyon, loud in some moments, silent in others. We traveled together, stood on foreign balconies with his arm around my shoulders and city lights beneath us. We fought sometimes, real fights, messy and human, but never cruel. And in those arguments, I found something precious: safety. Because I no longer feared love would cost me my identity. I didn't have to shrink for Ethan to shine. One rainy afternoon, while unpacking boxes from my old estate, I found something I hadn't expected to see: a photograph, yellowing at the corners, of the original 3 foster husbands my father had raised. Andrew,
Ryan, Ethan,
the boy I had loved, the boy who had saved me, and the boy I had never seen coming. My fingers trembled as I traced the image. What is it? Ethan asked, stepping beside me. I held it up. A reminder of how fate gives you options, but love makes you choose. He took the photo and placed it back in the box. Then we chose right. Months became seasons. Winter bled into spring, and one morning, as sunlight crept across our bedroom like gold-dipped silk, I turned to Ethan and asked, if we could go back, start over from the very beginning, would you still love me even if I was cruel to you again? He didn't hesitate.
Yes.
Because love isn't about waiting for someone to deserve it, it's about seeing who they are before they see it themselves. My chest tightened in the best way. That night, I dreamed of the village again, of pain and captivity and a girl who cried herself to sleep in the dark. But this time, she wasn't alone. She was older, stronger, and a boy knelt beside her, lighting a lantern in her palm, whispering, "This time, we walk out together." I woke up crying, not out of sadness, but from the quiet, aching relief of healing. I rolled over, pressed my forehead to Ethan's shoulder, and whispered, "Thank you." He stirred, half asleep. For what? I smiled. For seeing me before I knew how to see myself. We never found out what became of Lily. Rumors said she changed her name, started over somewhere no one would recognize her. Maybe that was her redemption. Or maybe it was her punishment to live in a world where we had moved on, and she was stuck reliving what she lost. As for Andrew, he was declared mentally unfit for trial, committed to a private institution far from the city. I never visited. Some things didn't need closure. They needed distance.
And Ryan?
He disappeared quietly from the public eye, his legacy tarnished, but his silence intact. In the end, none of them mattered. Because love didn't come wrapped in grand gestures or poetic declarations, it came in the quiet moments, in the coffee Ethan brought me at 7:13 a.m. Because he knew I hated waking up at 7:15. In the way he folded my sweaters, even though he never folded his own. In the way he said we instead of I, without ever thinking twice. I was no longer the girl with a silver spoon and a hollow heart. I was no longer the heiress defined by who loved her, who left her, or who betrayed her. I was just Vivian Carter. And that was enough. As I sat in the garden one late afternoon, watching the sunset paint the horizon in strokes of fire and honey, I reached for Ethan's hand and said, "You know, I never believed in fate." He smiled. "You believe in us?" "I do," I said, and for the first time, I meant it without fear. Because after everything, after death and betrayal and rebirth, I had finally learned that some endings aren't really endings. They're beginnings in disguise, waiting for us to finally be ready to live them right.